Assalamu alaikum dear students. I welcome you all in my next zoology class. This class will be dedicated for 11th standard. In 11th class we are going through endocrinology and we have studied several endocrine structures. Right now today's topic will be continuation of pituitary gland. In part first we have studied pituitary gland with an introductory part. Now it's part second. In part first we have studied that if it is a hypothalamus, attached with the hypothalamus is a very special structure. That special structure you call pituitary gland, and we have studied its dimensions as well as its location, and we have studied hypophyseal portal system, hypothalamic hypophyseal portal circulation. Simultaneously, we have also studied this very fact that pituitary gland is actually composed of two parts. The first part you call the anterior pituitary or the adenohypophysis, and the second part you call posterior pituitary or neurohypophysis. As well as we have already discussed this fact that pituitary gland, whole of the pituitary gland is composed of pars distalis, pars intermedia and pars nervosa. We have already studied that hypothalamus receives blood supply via superior and inferior hypothalamic arteries. At the same time, we have studied that these arteries divide into arterioles, arteriole divide into capillaries, capillaries then unite to form venules, and venules then unite to form a vein, and finally what happens is that these portal veins enter into the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. These portal veins actually bring neurohormones. These portal veins actually bring neurohormones from the neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus. And due to these neurohormones that are drained along with the blood into the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, that cause the activation of the special cells here in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, endocrine cells in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, and from the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, then several hormones are produced from this endocrine structure. Now, in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, there are actually very special types of cells. These cells are known as, in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, there are present special cells. These special cells in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland are known as chromophil cells. Chromophil cells. These chromophil cells actually contain pigment granules. These chromophil cells actually contain pigment granules. Basically, the chromophil cells in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, these chromophil cells are of two types. One is known as alpha cell, second is known as beta cell. When I say alpha cell, I mean alpha cells are also known as acidophils. Beta cells are also known as basophils. These acidophils or alpha cells produce two hormones. One hormone is known as GH or growth hormone, and second hormone is known as prolactin hormone. While as the beta cells are responsible for the production of special hormones. One hormone is known as FSH, second hormone is known as LH, third hormone is known as ACTH. Follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, adenocorticotropin hormone. Let me write here. FSH means follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone. LH means luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone. ACTH means adreno or adrenocorticotropin. Adrenocorticotropin hormone. And the fourth hormone producer is known as TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone. Right now what I have told you that from the hypothalamus special neurosecretory cells are present. These neurosecretory cells produce hormones. These are known as neurohormones. These neurohormones are basically of two types. One is the releasing hormone, second is the inhibiting hormone that we have discussed in our earlier class. After that, these neurohormones are drained into the blood from the hypothalamus. This structure here is hypothalamus. From the hypothalamus, these neurohormones are discharged into portal circulation. Discussed recently in our last lecture. These neurohormones are discharged into portal circulation. From portal circulation, these neurohormones are then drained into the anterior lobe of pituitary gland. In the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, there are present special types of cells. These are actually endocrine cells. These cells are known as chromophil cells. These chromophil cells get activated. Actually, the chromophil cells are of two types. When I say chromophil cells, I mean to say those cells that contain pigment granules. And these chromophil cells are actually stained. They are actually stained. इनको dye लगती है. They are stained by both acidic dye as well as by basic dye. Hence, these chromophil cells are actually of two types. First cell is called acidophil or alpha cell. Second cell is known as beta cell or basophil cell. Alpha cells are stained by acidic dyes. Beta cells are stained by basic dyes. As far as these endocrine cells, this is also endocrine cell, this is also endocrine cell. As far as this endocrine cell is concerned, alpha cell, these cells produce very special two hormones. The first hormone you call growth hormone and second hormone you call prolactin hormone. Likewise, in case of beta cells, these are also endocrine cells, stained by basic dye, and is called basophils. These cells produce four different types of hormones. First hormone you call thyroid stimulating hormone, second hormone you call follicle stimulating hormone, third hormone you call luteinizing hormone, and the fourth hormone you call adrenocorticotropin hormone. These are the 4 plus 2 makes 6 hormones from the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland after getting stimulation from hypothalamus. Hope you got it. If you are not aware of this, repeatedly watch it, you will get the concepts in a crystal clear manner. Now, second point. We are actually dealing with anterior lobe of pituitary gland. So, right now, let me again draw here. This is the pituitary gland, that to anterior lobe. Because we are only discussing right now anterior lobe of pituitary gland. This lobe that you call adenohypophysis, or simply this part, pars distalis. Now what I told is that from this anterior lobe of pituitary gland, 6 hormones are produced. The first hormone, growth hormone. The second hormone, prolactin hormone. The third hormone, FSH. Fourth hormone, LH. Fifth hormone, TSH. Sixth hormone, ACTH, adenocorticotropin hormone. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First of all, what we are going to study is that we will analyze the target structures of these hormones. so that we can get the rough idea of what actually is the role of these hormones in my metabolic activities or in my body. As far as the growth hormone is concerned, its target organ are usually the target organ for growth hormone is actually my bones. Along with bones, the target structure is muscles, muscle cells or myocytes, muscles. You can make flow chart at home while studying these structures. This is the simplest way to make you understand. As far as prolactin hormone is concerned, its target structure includes breasts, or you may call mammary glands. Target organ for prolactin hormone, mammary glands. Directly asked in NEET examinations or in any pre-medical entrance examinations. These concepts are usually asked. As far as FSH and LH is concerned, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, its target organs are actually the testicles and the ovaries. Testicles and the ovaries. So we should culminate the things by saying that FSH and LH has a target organs present both in males as well as in females. These target structures are actually known as gonads. Now, the next target for this hormone, it is follicles, it is thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone has a target organ that you call, as the name indicates, for thyroid stimulating hormone. For thyroid stimulating hormone, the target structure is thyroid gland. You have studied thyroid gland in your offline batch. Target organ for thyroid stimulating hormone, thyroid gland. As far as this hormone is concerned, adrenocorticotropin hormone, its target structure is adrenocorticotropic hormone के लिए the target structure includes this region of adrenal gland. This region is known as adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex. Have a quick recapitulation of what you have studied in point number 2. The point number 1 includes what actually are the hormones that are produced from anterior lobe of pituitary gland, and what are the types of cells, alpha cells and beta cells. The second point includes that from the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, the 6 respective hormones include growth hormone, prolactin, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, and adrenocorticotropin hormone. These are the 4 hormones. These are 6 hormones. So the target organ for growth hormone is bones and muscles. The target organ for prolactin is usually mammary glands or breasts. In mammary glands, that too, mammary glands contain, the breasts contain special structures. Those structures are known as glandular tissue. You may remember it. Glandular tissue is a special structure present in the breasts. That is the target organ for prolactin hormone. As far as follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone is concerned, their target organ includes the male gonads known as testicles and the female gonads known as ovaries. One ovary, second ovary. As far as thyroid stimulating hormone, hormone number 5 is concerned, its target structure is thyroid gland, located actually here in the neck region, just near this Adam's apple. As far as the last hormone, adrenocorticotropin hormone is concerned, this hormone has the target organ, that is adrenal cortex. The suprarenal gland has 2 parts. One is cortex, second is medulla. It is this cortex that is actually the target organ for this hormone, adrenocorticotropin hormone. Hope you got it. Now, next point. We have studied in detail all the hormones of pituitary gland, but right now we are dealing with the basics. Once basics are over, then we will go through each and every hormone in detailed fashion. Now, we are studying this very structure. Let us suppose, again, this is your hypothalamus. Attached with hypothalamus is a special stalk-like structure. That stalk-like structure is called infundibulum. Attached with the infundibulum is a special structure that is called pituitary gland. This pituitary gland is actually divisible into two parts, anterior lobe of pituitary gland and posterior lobe of pituitary gland. Till now, we were dealing, our main concern was anterior lobe of pituitary gland. Now, let us move to posterior lobe of pituitary gland. Actually, in the hypothalamus, there are present very, very special structures. These structures are actually called hypothalamic nuclei. In the hypothalamus, there are present special structures. These structures are called hypothalamic nuclei. These hypothalamic nuclei are actually the clusters of neurons or nerve cells. Or you may call these structures are actually the clusters of neurosecretory cells. These are actually the neuros. When we study hypothalamus in our neuroanatomy, there I will tell you what actually the neurosecretory cells mean. In the hypothalamus, there are actually present neurosecretory cells. So these neurosecretory cells have a special endocrine role. When I say they have they are actually nerve cells, neurons. They have a special endocrine role. That endocrine role is that they also produce hormones. Now, sir, these neurons from the hypothalamus, extend into the posterior lobe of pituitary gland. These neurons that you call hypothalamic nuclei, these neurons from hypothalamus extend into the posterior lobe of your pituitary gland. These neurons, you have studied neuron in class 9th, 10th, basics. If you don't know neuron, then you should know that each neuron is actually a cell that is composed of special structures. Those structures are called dendrites. And the second part is called a cell body. And the third part is called axon. And the fourth part is known as axon terminal. This is the basic thing that is taught in class LKG or UKG or maximum class 5th. So no need to discuss here. Because in 11th class, we will study here in detailed description the actual structure of neuron. But right now, you should learn the basic thing that from the hypothalamus, special neurons arise and they innervate and they enter into the posterior lobe of pituitary gland that you call neurohypophysis. This is the posterior lobe of pituitary gland. In this posterior lobe of pituitary gland that you call neurohypophysis, the hypothalamic neurons extend. Likewise here, hypothalamic neurons extend into the posterior lobe of your pituitary gland. So should we say, likewise, we have told that in the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, there are present special types of cells. These types of cells are known as chromophil cells. These include the alpha cells, the beta cells. Discussed 5 minutes prior to this. Likewise, in the posterior lobe of pituitary gland, that you call neurohypophysis. In the posterior lobe of pituitary gland, that you call neurohypophysis, contain the hypothalamic neurons. It is hypothalamic neuron. Neuron is extending from hypothalamus innervate into the posterior lobe pituitary gland. As well as in the posterior lobe pituitary gland, there are also present special types of cells. These special types of cells are known as pituiticides. Pituiticides. In the posterior lobe pituitary gland, there are present very special types of neurons. These are actually the hypothalamic neurons that extend into the posterior lobe pituitary gland. Simultaneously, pituitary gland also contains pituiticides. This posterior lobe pituitary gland also contains special cells. These cells are called pituiticides. These cells are actually also known as supporting cells or neuroglial cells. You may simply call them as supporting cells. If I will told you glial cells, you may not understand. So, for basics, this much is sufficient that in the posterior lobe pituitary gland there are present supporting cells or pituiticides as well as hypothalamic neurons extend. These hypothalamic neurons are actually the neurosecretory cells. They extend into the posterior lobe pituitary gland. And in these neurons, there are present special sacs in these neurons as well as in terminal axons or terminal buttons. In the terminal buttons as well as in the axons. This is axon. Likewise, this is axon. This is terminal harmonization or terminal buttons, or you call them axon terminals. This is a neuron, and these structures in class 9th, 10th you might have heard that these structures are actually axon terminals. What I told you that these are the neurons. So these neurons also have, if this is a neuron, this is also a neuron. This neuron also has special structure called axon and axon terminal. Here is a neuron. This neuron also has axon and axon terminals. Axon and axon terminals. Both axon and axon terminals contain special sac-like structures. Both axon and axon terminals contain special sac-like structures. So these sac-like structures are actually known as Herring's bodies. These sac-like structures are known as Herring's bodies. These sac-like structures are known as Herring's bodies. When I say these sac-like structures are called Herring's bodies, these Herring's bodies actually store two important hormones. These Herring's bodies, these sacs, these special structures, these special vesicles, these special sacs actually store two hormones. These two hormones are produced from neurosecretory cells of hypothalamus. This is hypothalamus. This hypothalamus contains neurosecretory cells. Neurosecretory cells are actually the neurons. So these neurons have the endocrine function, that is they produce hormones. When I say that there are present neurosecretory cells, these neurosecretory cells extend into the posterior lobe pituitary gland. Then these neurosecretory cells produce two important types of hormones. Sir, these two important hormones are stored in special sacs. These sacs are called Herring's bodies. These Herring's bodies are present in the axons as well as in axon terminals. Sir, the two hormones stored in these sacs, or those sacs you call Herring's bodies, the two hormones are actually known as, the first hormone is known as oxytocin, OXYTOCIN. The second hormone is known as vasopressin. Oxytocin and vasopressin. These are the two important hormones that are actually produced from the hypothalamus. Oxytocin and vasopressin. These are the two special hormones. They are actually the neurohormones because they are secreted from, they are produced, they are formed from the hypothalamus. That too from the neurosecretory cells of hypothalamus. And they are actually stored here. Where they are stored? They are stored in the special sacs. These sacs are called Herring's bodies. Where are these Herring's bodies located? They are located in the axons and axon terminals. Sir, these Herring's bodies store two hypothalamic hormones. The first hormone is known as oxytocin, second hormone is known as vasopressin. There's these two hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin. Both are stored in posterior lobe of pituitary gland. Both are stored in posterior lobe of pituitary gland. Oxytocin and vasopressin, both hormones are stored in posterior lobe of pituitary gland. Sir, the target organ for oxytocin is uterus. The target organ for vasopressin is kidney. We should stop the class here because it's a lengthy class and I do not have too much data for this larger lecture. Hope you may understand. Please repeatedly watch the video, you will get it. And do like, share and subscribe my channel. Assalamu alaikum.